I'm here because I am a roaring lion crying out righteousness. I do have some of the boring clips from the January 6th committee. And I think Senator Chris Murphy was being interviewed regarding whether or not to indict Trump or not. And this is going to be, first of all, Trump's not having a good week, not at all. I'm not sure how he's handling all of this. Because, I mean, everything's kind of coming down on, his entire life is coming down on him in one fell swoop. His taxes being released. He's being recommended for to the Department of Justice to be indicted on very serious criminal charges. And Fani Willis is also looking at potentially of an indictment of him on the call to Brad Rassenberger asking the Secretary of State of Georgia to go out there and find him some votes so he can win. And then there's a ton of other cases around America where the fake electors, or the so-called fake electors, were trying to overthrow the election. And but I think one of the things that, Carrie Lake's filing her case for governor of the state of Arizona is moving forward. One would have thought that it would just been thrown out of hand, but no, that's moving forward. And then the other thing is that an earthquake has hit San Francisco, 6.4 on the Richter scale. So we're watching those events as well, as they're all related to the tribulation. But I'm going to let you listen to this interview with Chris Murphy, and his statements regarding should America indict his former president.
In the middle of the night, lawmakers unveiled a new government funding bill that must pass in order to fund the government into next year and also avoid a government shutdown. It is expected to go through. Timing tight, though. Bill has to be signed by Friday when the current funding expires. And folks, hopefully, leave for their Christmas vacations. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut joins me now. Senator, thanks for taking the time this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So first on the top line number, this bill comes in at $1.7 trillion. As the Wall Street Journal noted, that's getting nearly as large as the $1.9 trillion March 2020 COVID relief bill. Given ongoing inflation and price hikes, is this an inflationary budget?
What you're seeing is some much needed downward pressure on inflation. What we're funding in this bill are essential services, right? This is mostly a bill about obligations, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. There are some big emergency numbers in this bill, but much of that is going overseas, $40+ billion for Ukraine. I don't think there's anything in this bill that isn't absolutely necessary for the health of the country. I don't anticipate that it'll have any extraordinary inflationary effect.
Okay. Other measures in here, it does include something you and others have championed, which is the Electoral Count Act reform. The former president who attempted to overturn an election in exactly this way, getting his vice president, in effect, to reject the electoral count, he's now running again. For folks watching at home, should they feel confident that this reform at least closes down that path to attempting to overturn an election?
So the Electoral Count Act was written in 1887 and it has never been updated. It governs how the Electoral College chooses a president. It's pretty vulnerable to attack. President Trump tried to probe it in several different ways in 2020 and was almost successful. Listen, this bill makes it harder for a corrupt president or a corrupt governor to send the wrong set of electors to Washington for the electoral count, but it doesn't completely rule out that possibility. So I don't want to overstate the importance of the Electoral Count Reform Act. It makes it harder for the wrong president to be chosen by the Electoral College, but it is still not impossible that Donald Trump, in league with some corrupt governor, could send the slate of electors for the losing candidate to the Electoral College.
Goodness, remarkable. Okay, another aspect of this, what's known as the Afghan Adjustment Act, did not make it in. This would have provided a path to permanent residency for the many Afghans who fled the country after the U.S. withdrawal and made it here to the U.S. Democrats, they still got the majority in both chambers. Why didn't they insist on including this in this bill?
Well, we did insist on including this in the bill. Remember, Republicans and Democrats both cheered our efforts to get our Afghan partners, interpreters, military advisors out of Afghanistan. But now, for some reason, Republicans are not supporting a pathway to allow those individuals to become permanent U.S. residents. We need 60 votes in the Senate to pass anything, and we do not have right now enough Republican support to get this done. So we're going to continue to push for this into next year. You've got so many of these Afghans living in limbo. They're in the United States, but only temporarily, and at any presidential whim, they could be sent back into a hostile environment, their lives at risk. This is still open business. We need a few more Republicans to support us here.
Another issue, and you've been watching events at the border with this open question as to whether Title 42 expires and when. I know that passing immigration reform in this country on Capitol Hill is just tough. There's a lot of opposition from Republicans, not a lot of political will from many Democrats here. But Democrats, again, they've had majority in both chambers for 2 years, and I know you need 10 votes in the Senate. But do Democrats bear responsibility, some responsibility, for failing to enact reforms that would have helped address the situation at the southern border? I'm not saying solve all the problems, but help address them.
Yeah, I think all 50 Democrats in the Senate support immigration reform. As you mentioned, the problem is we do not have enough Republicans to get it done. Senator Sinema, a Democrat or an independent now, and Senator Tillis, a Republican, unveiled a last-minute bipartisan proposal, and it was rejected by Republicans. So right now, under the rules of the Senate, we need a handful of Republicans to support immigration reform. They won't. Now, the budget includes some money to manage these increased numbers at the border, but it is much less than what the administration needs. Why is that? Because not only do Republicans oppose immigration reform, they also are opposing the money necessary to deal with the emergency. So you are going to see scenes of chaos at the border in January and February, and that is going to be in large part because Republicans aren't allowing us enough funding to deal with these increased numbers.
But is that fair? You got the president. The president has things he can do independently of broad.
I let that clip run. Basically, I wanted just the information regarding the January 6th committee, but I let it run because what it also does, it gives a rundown of the major issues that are happening right now at the close of the year in terms of what's happening on Capitol Hill. And so whether it's a Title 42 or whether it's the immigration or the Afghan issue or the passing of a budget to temporarily keep the government folk running for a while, and I'm not sure how much longer that will take place. But one other thing I think is important about this matter of the January 6th committee recommending 4 criminal charges to the Department of Justice against Tribulation Trump, that is the law clear about whether or not, if you have been indicted, can you still run for president? Because the types of crimes such as conspiracy to overthrow the government and with that kind of a tag on you, are you allowed to hold a public office? And I think the answer is that it's probably swinging in the wind, because if you're indicted, doesn't mean that you're guilty. And if you're only guilty until proven guilty. So does Trump's campaign get, a new boost, or does it get a slingshot, a sledgehammer across the head because of what's happening presently with the whole matter of the January 6th committee?